The Heat were facing the shorthanded Golden State Warriors and lost the game 118 to 104. But the story is an altercation that took place on the Heat sideline involving Jimmy Butler, Udonis Haslem, and Erik Spoelstra. What happened? How did the players react to the outburst? And is this a team on the verge of a collapse or something more? We'll break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat, however you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Look, the Heat were taking on the Golden State Warriors on Wednesday night. The Warriors were without Draymond Green, no Steph Curry, no Klay Thompson. They were severely undermanned, and yet Miami was still locked in a very tight battle, 50-50 at halftime, when after the start of the third quarter, the Warriors went on a 13-0 run, capped by a Jordan Poole three that led to this altercation along the Heat sideline.
Yeah, so for the people that are listening and not watching, it was a pretty crazy scene, right? You've got Udonis Haslem getting into it with Jimmy Butler, pointing at him, having to be held back by his teammates. We had seen other video before this showing how Erik Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler had gotten into it on the Heat bench during a timeout, like you said, after that Jordan Poole three that Jimmy Butler was defending on. And so we don't really know exactly what was said here. There are ideas, some lip reading people out there saying that maybe Erik Spoelstra was questioning whether or not Jimmy Butler wanted to fight him. Udonis Haslem saying, don't fight him, you can fight me, or some sort of version of that, right? But obviously a very heated, intense moment in the middle of the third quarter in what ended up being their second disappointing loss in a row.
Yeah. And then after that, the Heat responded by allowing two more three-pointers from Jordan Poole, building a 19-point lead at that point for the Warriors. And Miami responded with a 30-12 run, actually wound up taking the lead, and yet in the fourth quarter wound up collapsing. Jordan Poole was just too good, unfortunately, for the Warriors. He led the Golden State Warriors to the victory over Miami. Again, none of this seems to matter. We're talking about the game because it's the context for what happened. It's the second straight game, as you pointed out, Wes, in which the Heat were down. The Heat were facing a team that was missing their superstars, their key players. And in the words of Kyle Lowry, they played badly. They got their asses beat, and that's just the reality of what happened. But what everybody's talking about is the footage that you just showed, and again that you described regarding the altercation on the sidelines. So nobody really spoke about exactly what happened in the post game. They mentioned it was just a dust up. A lot of emotions flaring, not that big a deal. They kind of tried to play it off. But the reality was that it looked much more intense at the time. Like, we have never seen that kind of level of emotionality or physicality from Erik Spoelstra, Udonis Haslem, and their superstar Jimmy Butler.
No, the closest thing that I could think of to it was sort of the bump gate between LeBron and Erik Spoelstra in just level of weirdness. Obviously not the same at all. Like, Spo didn't threaten to throw hands with LeBron, but just in level of weirdness in that because it happened in a public setting, it is a big deal. Every Heat player, Erik Spoelstra post game, they all tried to just kind of blow it off, just
Shrug it off,
sweep it under the rug, shrug it off. And look, PJ Tucker after the game said, put a camera in any locker room in any football or basketball team in professional sports, and you'll see stuff like this every single day. And yeah, I guess, but that happens in the locker room. It is different when it happens on the sideline. It is different when it happens in the middle of a third quarter while you're giving up a 13-0 run to a team that is without all of their star players, and it looks like you're going to go to a second straight loss to a team without its best players. It is different. It is a big deal. And it makes sense why this is the story that people are running with right now. All over SportsCenter. It's everywhere. It's the only thing that was asked about in postgame. It's because it is a big deal. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it I guess Spo sort of credited it for the spurt later in the game.
Yep.
The Heat went on a 34-12 run and ended
Yep.
up actually taking the lead after this. And it sort of looked like it would sort of be the thing that galvanized the team. Ultimately, the Heat didn't have enough to win the game. But it was very strange. It was very weird. And I don't know if it's I don't know if it's such a big deal that I'm like now questioning the vibes of the team. I'm not there yet. It just signals to me that this is a team. This is the low point of the season for the Miami Heat. That's what this means. It doesn't mean you can't come out of it, and I know that we'll talk about that later on. But that was the low point of the Miami Heat season right there.
That's a fair take. And again, we're here filming this. I'm filming this in Bernie's dressing room at FTX Arena. Wes is in the dressing room next door because the players themselves took an eternity to come out to their post-game pressers. So there was clearly, again, without locker room access, what would have been historically us waiting outside the locker room to find out what would happen or to hear players screaming. None of that access is allowable in today's
Right.
world. And so what we have to do is basically wait in the interview room for players to be brought out. And that's exactly what happened. We waited for over 30 minutes when eventually Kyle Lowry, not Erik Spoelstra, usually the first one to come out there, Kyle Lowry goes out and addresses media. And this is what part of what he had to say regarding the dust up.
Basketball games, that stuff happens. They making shots, and frustration builds up sometimes. And we had 2 games in a row where they're better players, the stars, and not playing, and lost, and frustration builds sometimes. But I think it's a situation where it's good to get it out of the way and then move forward. We're not going to dwell on it. We're going to continue to look and see what happened, and as a team on the court, and go from there.
Well, there you have it. As you probably expected, Lowry, as you pointed out earlier, sweeping it under the rug a little bit, just kind of trying to move on, as you assume players would. They're not going to address it. They're not going to talk about exactly what happened. They're not going to mention the specifics of what was said between Spoelstra and Udonis and Jimmy Butler. That's reserved for the people that were sitting close to or behind the Heat bench that got a chance to overhear that. That's what that's what I heard first. Actually, I heard, whoa. Like there was this moan from that part of the crowd, and then you kind of look over there, and then you start to see Udonis Haslem being held back, and Jimmy Butler being held back, pushed away from there, and you didn't even notice. At least at first, we didn't really notice that Erik Spoelstra was part of the altercation as well. And again, it's just hard to parse exactly what led to that frustration. Definitely emotions boiling over.
I mean, Kyle Lowry, I thought, hit on something really specific there, which was our best players weren't playing well.
Yep.
When the other teams, these last 2 games, didn't even have their best players available because of rest or injuries or otherwise. And so, I mean, you kind of go back to what started this. And again, we don't exactly know specifics, but there was something going on with Jimmy Butler, right? It was between Jimmy Butler, Udonis Haslem, and Erik Spoelstra. Well, Udonis Haslem doesn't play, so he wasn't part of the on-the-court problem. Jimmy Butler, I said to you in the first quarter, we're sitting in media row, and Jimmy Butler has 10 points in that first quarter, and I lean over to you and I say, you know what? I know he had 10 points in the first quarter. It feels like he should have had 20. The way that the Warriors were playing him, defending him, which was, barely. They had rookie Jonathan Kuminga, who Jimmy Butler punked on a couple different occasions in the first quarter, right? Got him to bite for pump fakes and things like that. He could have, they were playing with one of Jordan Poole or Chris Chiozza or Damian Lee on the court the entire game. Like, you're telling me Jimmy Butler, predatorial wing, guy who hunts mismatches all the time, couldn't just get a switch anytime he wanted on one of those guys? And I don't know that I saw the bully ball Jimmy Butler that we're accustomed to seeing. I don't even really know that I've seen it lately. And I wonder if something was said to him on the sideline or at some point where it's just like, hey, just go do that. And I do wonder where Jimmy Butler was just from mentally. Yeah, right now he had 15 total field goal attempts in the game. Yep. At that point of the break, right before the argument, he had attempted 12. He was in the game the entire third quarter and most of the fourth quarter. The entire third quarter, rested 90 seconds of the fourth quarter, then was in for the rest of the game. Took just 3 shots that entire point. I mean, after that skirmish, you would expect Jimmy Butler to kind of come out and try to impose his will and be angry or something. Just see some sort of that Jimmy Butler dog personality that we hear so much about. It wasn't that. I mean,
We see the exact opposite, actually. It
it
seemed
was
like
like
Jimmy was.
LeBron against the Mavericks in the finals. Just like it was like, I know it wasn't that bad, it wasn't that extreme, but it was a
No.
little bit of the same. Like, I don't understand why he's not doing more. I just can't wrap my mind around it.
Well, we'll talk about that in the next segment because there's a lot of concern about whether or not Jimmy has historically shown some bad locker room behavior and whether or not that's finally spilled over here in 2.5 seasons with the Miami Heat. That's never been an issue, but it might be something to look at moving forward. And we'll talk about what happens next for this team because they're still in the heart of a playoff run. Overlooking all this, they're still the first seed in the Eastern Conference, but for how much longer will they be able to hold on to that? We'll break it all down next here on Locked on NBA. But first, just a reminder that this show is brought to you by Truebill. Do you know why free trials renew without your consent? It's a business scam out to get you. Don't let greedy corporations pocket your money. Download Truebill to take control of your subscriptions. Truebill is a new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forget about. On average, people save about $720 a year with Truebill. Companies make subscriptions hard to cancel, so Truebill makes it incredibly simple. You just link your accounts, and Truebill will cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions in one tap. And your Truebill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions, so you don't have to. It's helped 2 million plus users. And it's helped save them over $100 million. You could be next. Don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now to truebill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands a year. NBA Top Shot is the officially licensed NFT of the NBA. This is a new partner for the Locked On Network. You can connect with a community of hundreds of thousands of NBA fans as a natural progression of fantasy sports, a way to upgrade your experience as an NBA fan. This is the future of what being an NBA fan looks like. It combines the thrill of trading cards, fantasy sports, and a stock market all in one. Investors include Michael Jordan, Kevin Durant, Tyrese Halliburton, Cole Anthony, and tons of NBA players. Players know that this is a hot opportunity to get involved in. I've heard people ask, why would I buy a highlight when I can watch it for free? It's not just about watching a highlight. It's about having an ownership stake in what's like the stock market for the NBA's greatest highlights. No one would have guessed that a piece of cardboard with Babe Ruth's picture on it would be worth millions one day, and everyone would have thought you were crazy, but this is the beginning of the digital age, and the NBA's officially licensed NFT will be a big part of that. If you sign up for Top Shot today, the best way to start is getting yourself a starter pack. You can pull an NFT of a superstar like LeBron or KD or star rookies like Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley for just $9. If you don't pull your favorite player for the starter pack, you can snag moments from the marketplace that appeal to you. So sign up today and take your fandom to the next level by starting your Top Shot collection today.
Back here with Locked On Heat. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So to move this conversation forward, David,
Yep.
we talked about whether or not this was a turning point in the game, and it kind of was. They didn't win the game, the Heat didn't, but it was a little bit. They played better for a long stretch afterwards.
Without a doubt.
I don't know how much that has to do with just being galvanized by this moment on the bench, or just the fact that they played their starters against the Warriors bench players for the entire third quarter. I don't know. But to kind of zoom out a little bit here, with 9 games left in the season, is this a turning point for the Miami Heat, either for better or for worse?
Well, should we get into the Jimmy Butler discussion, or should we save that for our last segment? Because I think that's something that a lot of Heat fans are concerned about. Maybe we'll save that for the third. As far as the turning point decision,
No, I mean, what was the Jimmy Butler conversation?
no, to me, I just think a lot of people are concerned that Jimmy has turned for the worse here for Miami. I think a lot of people are claiming that he's frustrated, maybe that this is the very worst of him. I know it's easy for people on the outside to pick at this and say, "Oh, this is Jimmy rearing his ugly head, the locker room cancer that he's been in Philadelphia or Minnesota or Chicago when he forced his way from those teams. That this is just the next." Again, the turning point for him and his status here with the Miami Heat to actually go into, to accost your coach, to challenge your coach to this level, to challenge the original, the OG Udonis Haslem, to challenge him for a fight and things of that sort. I think a lot of people are worried about what this means about Jimmy and his place on this team. And look, I can understand that there's a lot of frustration here, but to your point earlier, you don't do this on the sidelines. If I understand emotions are running high, you say what's on your mind right away. Somebody says something, the adrenaline's running. You're in the heat of the moment, no pun intended. And somebody says something, or you overhear something, or maybe you just take it the wrong way, and next thing you know, you can explode in a way that now is being seen by millions of people. This is a story on SportsCenter. This is a story along every social media platform, and it's just a bad look for a team that needs their superstars to play their very best over the next 9 games and pushing
Yeah.
into a playoff run. And so I think there's some concern about whether or not Jimmy Butler is going to be jumping ship at this point. So
There's two ways to look at this. I think you're certainly right. From the outside perspective, this is Jimmy Butler's reputation, right? This is what people think of when they think of Jimmy Butler. They think of him getting his way out of Chicago, then getting his way out of Minnesota, and then getting his way, most maybe famously, out of Philadelphia, or maybe it was out of Minnesota. I don't know. It was
yeah,
ugly both times. Eventually finds his way with the Miami Heat, where his entire MO and the Heat's entire organizational culture mesh. It was a perfect fit, all the things that we've heard. I'm not concerned that this is a Jimmy Butler doing the same old thing that he used to do. This is a team that was in the finals 2 seasons ago with Jimmy Butler leading the way. It is with a group of players who Jimmy Butler admires and respects and likes on a personal level, between Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, like all that stuff. I'm not concerned about a Minnesota or a Philadelphia thing happening. The other way to look at this is that Jimmy Butler just hasn't been playing really well. And at a point in time where you need to start ramping up and playing your best basketball. And the Heat have played awesome basketball all season long until this last couple games. But this has been a tough month now for Jimmy Butler, who's missed basically every other game. And his numbers for the month, I mean, they're just not good. He's under 20 points per game. He's shooting like 41% overall. He's only attempting like 13 shots on average in the month of March. Like, that's just not what you need from your star player, right? And I do wonder if that's sort of what kind of contributed to the argument on the bench. Was this team, you've got Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Kyle Lowry on the floor. The Warriors do not have Steph, Clay, or Draymond Green. This was not a night where, I know that Max Strus went 0 for 5, Markieff Morris 0 for 2, Caleb Martin
no
0
Tyler
for
Hero,
1,
by the
Victor
way.
Oladipo 3 of 11. Yeah, no Tyler Hero in the game. None of that matters when you have your three best players and your best player in Jimmy Butler, and the Warriors just don't have any of their top players, and they're relying on their sixth man to carry the scoring load for them. And Jordan Poole's been awesome for them this season, no doubt about it, but that's no excuse. And
Right.
at some point, if you're Jimmy Butler, you need to just take this game over. And I just feel like we haven't really seen that from him very recently. And I wonder if that's part of the boiling over frustrations that we saw.
So let's assume it's not a matter of Jimmy Butler locker room cancer so much as Jimmy Butler going, you know what, I'm kind of upset and frustrated, and maybe somebody on the roster, whether it's Udonis or Erik Spoelstra or
I wonder
somebody
if somebody
else,
called him out and said, "Why don't you just go score?" And Jimmy Butler
right?
probably, maybe Jimmy Butler said something that rubbed the other
Yeah, he
person
was
when he said
leading
it
the
the wrong
team in
way.
scoring up to that point. Like the 34 to the 12 run that we talked about earlier was mostly led by Bam Adebayo and Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry wound up shooting the three much more aggressively. He had
Yeah,
been fine before that point. He took it to yet another level following that, finished the night 6 of 9 from 3-point range. Again, phenomenal during that
yeah.
34 to 12 run. Jimmy only scored 2 points during that whole run. And so you wonder whether or not he says, you know what, I've been doing all this scoring. And again, this is all theoretical on our part. But
Yeah.
you wonder whether or not he said, you know what, I'm the only one scoring. Why didn't somebody else step up and then kind of maybe, again,
You look
ignited
at his
some
box
players there?
score: 20 points on 7 for 15 shooting, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. Excuse me. Most people would just look at the box score and be like, "Yeah, it wasn't his best game. It was a good game. 20 points on an efficient shooting night." He should have scored 40 in this game. This should have been his highest scoring game of the season, with the way the Warriors have been playing defense lately and who was guarding him and who the Warriors did not have available. Jimmy Butler had 10 in the first quarter. He should have had 20 in the first quarter. He should have had 40 in this game, and the Heat should have won this game running away, right? Like, the only reason he shouldn't have had 40 was because he was resting the entire fourth quarter because it was a blowout. This was not a good game by Jimmy Butler. I'm not trying to put all the blame on him, but
Nope,
Lowry, Bam, they stepped up, man. They had
he did.
51 points between the two of them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And again, that was they had their big moments during the instrumental run where they wound up overtaking the Warriors and wound up getting a lead. And then again, Jordan Poole caught fire late in the fourth quarter. He was a difference maker for the Warriors. Wind up leading them to a 118-104 victory for Golden State over the Miami Heat, their second straight loss to an undermanned team. A lot of frustration, a lot of boiling over. But is this a turning point for the Heat season? What happens next? We'll talk about that in the next segment. Before we do that, just a reminder that this show is brought to you by BetOnline. It's that time of year again as college basketball's NCAA tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online where the game starts. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. Coming to you here from FTX Arena following perhaps one of the most bizarre altercations in Miami Heat history. This is a franchise that loves to keep things tightly under wraps, that loves to be able to just control the messaging that's put out there regarding this team, that has rarely had any kind of public issues, certainly nothing regarding players to the most part. I mean, there have been a few instances here and there throughout the team's history, as you would imagine, when it comes to professional sports, and any franchise would have their dust-ups. But this is something that we did not expect from this team. And maybe it's just frustration. Maybe it's something more. But we'll talk about that now because this could be a turning point for the Heat franchise. And that's kind of where I'm leaning towards it right now. If I said, look, well, we won't find out what happens until the Heat take on the New York Knicks here at FTX Arena on Friday and then have a back-to-back against the Brooklyn Nets on Saturday. That should be an exciting matchup there. This could be what finally drives the Heat to become the best version of themselves, that galvanizes this group into becoming a much more cohesive unit. And we started to see glimpses of that during that 34-12 run, where all of a sudden the defense was taken to another level, where all of a sudden the passes were a little crisper. They were diving for loose balls. The effort was a much better level following the altercation on the sidelines there. As far as whether or not it's a turning point in the other direction, could this be the signal that this team is on the verge of falling apart? Because I think a lot of people believe that too. Maybe there's just a doom and gloom nature to any fan base, and I totally advise against it. But they look at this team, they look at Jimmy, blowing up against Erik Spoelstra of all people, and Erik Spoelstra saying, "Oh, what, you want to fight me?" According to some lip readers out there, and a lot of the perception is whether or not this team has a major problem, and then you get the vibe from Spo in the postgame press conference. PJ Tucker saying, "Oh, he just laughed about that. It's just a bunch of men out there getting frustrated in the middle of any sports team, blah, blah, blah." And I just don't, I'm kind of thinking that they're able to weather this storm. And that's, I think, the big takeaway for me is that as bad as things were, as bizarre as they were on this Wednesday night, I think they'll be able to handle this challenge and be able to move forward, as everybody indicated in the postgame presser.
If Heat culture is as strong as the Miami Heat says that it is,
as a branding,
then this argument on the sideline, it was a big deal. Like I said at the top of the show, this was a big deal. But if Heat culture is as strong as they say that it is, it shouldn't be such a big deal that it craters this season, right? If Heat culture is that strong, if Heat culture is in fact real, then this should be a moment that galvanizes the team for the final 9 games and maybe even the playoffs and doesn't have the opposite effect. Lesser teams would crumble under this. Your top player, your historically great player, and your head coach all in a massive argument for public display on a sideline in a game that you had no business losing, in the second game just like that. A second game in a row where you have no business losing, that could ruin weaker teams. I'm with you. I don't think this ruins the Miami Heat seasons. I think that this probably maybe sends it the other way. That was the most energy I've seen from the Miami Heat in about a week, David.
Yep.
Or was on the sideline. That's been the problem with this team. No energy, just in a lull, not closing out, being a little bit lazy. Maybe it's fatigue. maybe it's to what Kyle Lowry keeps pointing to the last couple of games is just weird rotations and feeling each other out and just trying to maybe, you know what? The truth is probably a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But
I'm
that,
glad you
like,
brought up the Lowry point there, because I think that's something that we're all kind of overlooking, is that this team has defined themselves all season on being able to rise to the challenge of missing Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo or Lowry for a prolonged period of time. And then there's always the light at the end of the injury tunnel regarding Victor Oladipo, which you wrote about for The Ringer, which everybody should check out, by the way. Great piece on you, incredible reporting, talking about Oladipo's comeback and what we can expect from him moving forward. So everybody was looking forward to Victor Oladipo's return, and now that it's here, and it's been somewhat underwhelming. He has not come in and immediately contributed 25 points a night. He hasn't been able to play all NBA levels defense for prolonged stretches. His minutes have been short. Tonight, I think, was actually his best game this season, despite the productivity being somewhat low. My overall point here with this is that now it's been difficult to incorporate. We're you kind of see all these players trying to figure out their roles there. Oladipo is somewhat, kind of clunky out there, not sure exactly where to go at times. You've got all the guys like Gabe Vincent who are no longer in the rotation. I know he's hurt, but PJ Tucker brought up his name that, one night he's starting, the next night he's not even playing at all. The next night he's starting again and playing 20 minutes a game. And it's so hard for players to figure out their role in this team right now.
Yeah, and Erik Spoelstra said after the game when asked about the rotations is, and by the way, a little inside stuff, like usually Erik Spoelstra and the head coach of whatever basketball team is the first to come out in the post-game press conference.
Yeah.
Tonight it was a little bit weirder, I guess, based on the events. Kyle Lowry was out first, and he actually pointed the finger at the rotations, and so us the reporters had an opportunity to ask Spoelstra about what Lowry's comment was. I just found that interesting. I don't know if people care about that, but so Spoelstra said, hey, we're going to have some tough decisions to make. We don't have to make them now. We still have 9 games to kind of experiment and stuff. But he said, quote, I wrote it down, we will have some tough decisions, have to figure some things out. That to me was essentially saying all of it's on the table. Victor Oladipo might not be part of the playoff rotation. He needs to earn it, just like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Caleb Martin, all these guys. Everybody involved here needs to earn it. Markieff Morris, Dwayne Dedmon, everybody's got to earn those minutes. If you're not one of the 5 starters for Tyler Herro, all these minutes need to be earned. Maybe it is playoff matchup dependent. Maybe it's a little bit of that, whatever. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to earn those minutes. And so I don't think anything's guaranteed for Victor Oladipo or anybody on this roster. I wonder if this is sort of the moment where it's a little bit of a put up or shut up type of deal where, all right, we've lost 2 games in a row now. We're getting into public arguments on the bench. We're the talk of SportsCenter. It's the most ESPN has talked about us all friggin' season. We don't want this to be the talking point. We want the fact that we're still number 1 in the East, by the way, now down to a 1.5 game lead over the Bucks for the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But we want that to be the conversation, not that we're arguing on the sideline, right? And so I do think that there's a real opportunity for this to turn things around, because this is still the number 1 team in the league. We have seen what this team is capable of very, very recently. It's not like this was just some sort of blip in the first month of the season. Like, I think this team is more of what we've seen for 98% of the season and not necessarily what we've seen the last week. They just needed an energy boost. And I think that this could give it to them.
Yeah. Spo and the players mentioning something, I found it a little interesting as well. They kept reiterating, we were playing really good basketball up until the last couple of weeks or so. We were, us trying to incorporate Oladipo and Morris and stuff like that. Kind of just saying, hey, guys, remember, we were a really, really good team. And now we're just kind of going through this really clunky phase. And that's something that we're not kind of considering here, is that normally these adjustments are made in season, not in game 73. And that's the situation here, is that they're trying to figure out.
He's like, I thought we were going to be doing this 2 months ago, but between the Oladipo being really protective over that knee, and then with Markieff Morris handing off the responsibility to the NBA front office on all that, like it's become so much later in the season than they anticipated.
Yeah.
So I kind of lost track on my point earlier, but I think maybe this is the point where not only does it galvanize in terms of an energy thing, but it kind of creates some sort of immediacy to figure out that rotation stuff sooner.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that does that, though. I really, now Spo with the microscope on him, or maybe it's more of a magnifying glass here, because it's all of a sudden again, questioning of Heat culture, questioning whether or not Jimmy is the right fit for this team yet again, et cetera, et cetera. Does he make the harsh decisions now, or does he still try to keep everybody together and say, you know what, well, let's try to figure out how to get Oladipo on the floor?
Yeah.
And maybe none of this matters somehow if Tyler Hero is out on the floor, which is another problem, is that you're relying a lot on the 22-year-old Hero's offense to come and save the day for this Heat team, and that's not necessarily a place for where this team wants to be as a championship contender. The flip side of all this, is I'm thinking about this, is that you saw this Heat team pull out incredible victories over the course of the season when they were missing key players, their superstars as well. And yet we kind of attested that to the development of this team, the kind of internal structure, the culture, if you will, of this group. And Miami has been victimized by that over the last couple of games, where we saw players like Tyrese Maxey and others step up for the Philadelphia 76ers without James Harden and Joel Embiid. Tonight it was Jordan Poole or Damian Lee or Kuminga having a huge game and just instrumental moments during key runs for the Golden State Warriors that ultimately led to the loss for Miami. And look, other teams do this. I think Lowry pointed it out, and it's something that we failed to consider, is that when you have players all of a sudden get this opportunity to star and to be able to be productive without Steph Curry on the floor, Steph Curry, who changes so much of the dynamic for this Warriors team, you're going to take advantage of it. And that's exactly what Jordan Poole has, the same way Tyler Hero and so many others have done. And so I think that's partly what Miami has been, they've fallen prey to the same thing that helped define so much of their early season success. To put a bow on all this.
Well, can I make one point there?
Absolutely.
I think that there was some sort of momentum that was happening in December when Miami had all their guys out, and they just sort of found something. They captured lightning in a bottle a little bit. I'm not taking anything away from the Heat. It's a credit that they were able to build momentum in that way. The Warriors, they just came off of their low point. They lost to the Orlando Magic, for God's sake.
Right.
And it wasn't even close. The night before tonight, right? And it was the same sort of situation with them, with injuries and all that kind of stuff. But Klay Thompson was playing, Draymond Green was playing. Like, they didn't have Steph, but whatever. And that was their low point. And they came out and they turned things around, and they got a really nice win for them against the Heat in Miami. You see stuff like this happen across the league. Maybe not like with the argument which is going to catch all the headlines here. But if this is indeed the low point, which I believe it is right now this season for the Heat, and what has been a season of mostly high points, right? This is certainly the low one. I wonder if it has that sort of effect, and I think it does. I think this team has earned at least the benefit of the doubt. If we're asking the question, does this turn things around positively or negatively? I think this team has earned the benefit of the doubt that we would say positively. I guess we'll see on Friday.
Yeah, we won't know until then when they take on the New York Knicks here from FTX Arena. No practice scheduled for the team tomorrow. They'll be having a film session. Hopefully, their tempers will stay cool as they review some of what happened, and hopefully they'll overlook that little skirmish in the third quarter there. But that's all for tonight. Thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Now, make sure you make your second listen Locked On NBA. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm David Ramil, signing off for now. Thanks for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.